They say the people you love most can hurt you the deepest, and that night, my son proved it true. Rain hammered the windows of my small house in Eugene, Oregon, while I stood in the kitchen clutching a chipped mug that once belonged to my late husband. The clock read 11:47 p.m. when Brian, my only son, pointed at me with shaking hands and shouted, "Mom, you're nothing but a burden. You're dragging me down." The word burden cut through the air sharper than broken glass. I barely whispered, "Brian, this is still your home." He laughed, bitter, angry. "No, it's mine now." Then he slammed the door so hard the family photos rattled off the wall. When the silence came, it was unbearable. I sat at the kitchen table, the smell of burnt coffee and rain filling the room. I thought about the boy who used to draw me Mother's Day cards with crayons. Where had he gone? By morning, the sound of police sirens replaced the rain. 2 cruisers pulled up outside Miss Whitmore, the officer asked softly, "We need to ask you a few questions about your son, Brian." My stomach turned cold. Behind him, Brian's car sat abandoned by the curb engine, still running a letter on the passenger seat addressed to me. My fingers trembled as I reached for it, but before I could unfold the paper, the officer's radio crackled. "Unit 4, we've located the second account. Possible fraud, over." My heart nearly stopped. Fraud, my Brian. The rain started again, heavier this time, washing over the porch as I stood frozen, clutching that unopened letter. What could he have done? And why did he leave a message only for me before everything fell apart? My days were quiet, almost too quiet. At 68, I'd gotten used to the rhythm of small things, feeding the robins on the porch every morning, folding laundry while the local radio whispered old country songs, and watering the little garden out back that my late husband Henry had planted 20 years ago. I used to be a nurse at Sacred Heart Hospital in Eugene. 35 years of night shifts, emergency calls, and holding strangers' hands while machines beeped their last notes. I'd seen death, pain, and miracles, but nothing prepared me for the loneliness that came after retirement. Brian was supposed to be my comfort, my only child. When Henry died of a heart attack, Brian was still in college. He'd hugged me at the funeral and promised, "Mom, I'll take care of you now." For a while, he meant it. He moved back home, helped fix the roof, made me laugh again. I'd sit by the fireplace watching him code on his laptop, proud that he'd become a software engineer at such a young age. But over time, the warmth in our home faded. It started with small things, him sighing when I asked for help with groceries, rolling his eyes, when I forgot my phone charger, shutting himself in his room during dinner. Then came the comments. "Mom, maybe you should sell the house and move into one of those retirement places." I laughed the first time. "This is our home, Brian. Your father built it with his hands." He didn't smile. "Yeah, and now it's falling apart just like everything else." I tried to ignore it. I told myself he was stressed, overworked, but the words grew sharper each week. Once I overheard him on the phone with a friend. "Man, I can't even bring anyone over. My mom's always around. It's pathetic." That one hurt, not because he said it, but because he meant it. I started tiptoeing around my own house, cooking less, talking less, trying not to bother him. Some nights I'd eat soup alone while hearing him laugh with his friends online. The walls that once echoed with family dinners now only carried the sound of silence and muffled voices. Still, I couldn't bring myself to blame him. I thought maybe I was a burden. My knee still hurt from the fall last winter, and the heating bill had doubled. I kept a small jar in the cabinet labeled, "For Brian," where I slipped in a few dollars from my pension each week. I thought it might help him see that I was trying, that I wasn't just someone to take care of, but the more I gave, the colder he became. He started locking his office door, whispering into his phone late at night, and once, when I knocked to say goodnight, he snapped, "Can't you leave me alone for 5 minutes?" I remember retreating to my room that night, clutching the photo of us from his high school graduation, his arm around me, both of us smiling. I stared at that photo until my vision blurred. Somewhere between those smiles and the man yelling at me in the kitchen, something broke, not just in him, but in both of us. I didn't know it then, but the distance growing between us wasn't just emotional. It was leading to something darker, something that would drag both our names into the hands of the police. And it all started with one thing I didn't see coming, a document I had signed years ago, thinking I was helping my son. a document that would soon become the weapon he used against me. It happened gradually, like rust creeping under paint small enough at first that you pretend not to see it. After my knee surgery, I couldn't move around much. I needed help with groceries, with the yard, sometimes even with the stairs. Brian used to help without complaint, but now every favor came with a sigh. You know, Mom, some of my friends' parents still work. They don't just sit around. That line cut deeper than any knife. I'd spent 35 years saving lives, raising him alone, skipping meals, so he could have new sneakers in middle school, and now, suddenly, I was lazy. One night, I overheard him talking on the phone, pacing in the living room. Yeah, she's still here. No, I can't rent out the house, she won't move. It's like living with a ghost. He didn't know I was in the hallway, gripping the door frame so tight my knuckles went white. I wanted to scream, but all I did was whisper, "I'm sorry to nobody." After that, he started sending me bills. Actual printed bills stacked on my nightstand, electricity, water, groceries, all circled in red ink. "You use half this stuff, Mom. You should contribute." I stared at the papers, my chest tightening. My pension barely covered my medications, but I nodded anyway. "Of course, sweetheart, I'll manage." I began selling little things, Henry's watch, my pearl earrings, even a vintage sewing machine I'd used for years. Each time I told myself it was temporary, just until Brian's career took off. But it never seemed to be enough. One afternoon, I found him sitting in the dining room, laptop open, surrounded by bank statements. His expression was cold. "Mom," he said flatly, "I need you to sign this. It's just to make paying the bills easier." I glanced at the document, something about joint accounts and digital authorization. He smiled the way he used to when he wanted to borrow the car as a teenager. "Trust me, it's just paperwork," I signed, without reading, because that's what mothers do. Later, when I asked if he wanted dinner, he barely looked up. "Order something for yourself. I'm meeting friends." The screen of his laptop glowed blue against his face, and for a second, I didn't recognize him. That weekend, I ran into our neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, while taking out the trash. She smiled kindly. "Everything okay, Eleanor? I heard Brian shouting again last night." I forced a smile. "Just a misunderstanding." But her eyes said she didn't believe me. At night, I'd lie awake listening to the refrigerator buzz and the pipes groan, trying to drown out the voice in my head whispering, "You've become a burden." Still, I kept trying. I baked his favorite lemon pie for his birthday, left a handwritten card on the counter that said, "I'm proud of you." When he came home, he didn't touch the pie. The card ended up in the trash, unopened. That was the night something inside me started to harden. I walked into his room the next morning to tidy up old habit and saw a letter from a bank on his desk. My name was faintly visible through the envelope window. My heart skipped. I didn't open it. I just stared, confused, wondering why a bank was writing to him about me. When he caught me there, his tone turned sharp. "Mom, I told you to stay out of my room. I was just cleaning," I stammered. He glared at me. "You always say that. You're always in the way." The word always burned like acid. I left the room quietly, but something about that envelope stayed in my mind. I didn't know it yet, but that thin piece of paper with my name and his address would later become the first thread unraveling his lies. And when it did, neither of us would ever see each other the same way again. The nights grew longer after that. Silence had its own sound, the ticking clock, the creak of old floorboards, the faint hum of Brian's computer behind his locked door. It felt like living with a stranger who just happened to share my last name. I began writing again. I found one of my old nursing notebooks and turned it into a journal. Each night before bed, I wrote a few lines, not about pain or anger, but memories I didn't want to lose. June 4th. 4th, Brian used to leave sticky notes on the fridge that said, "Love you, Mom." June 10th, he doesn't even look up from his phone when I speak now. June 15th, maybe I did something wrong. Maybe I made him this way. The pages filled fast, each one heavier than the last. Sometimes my tears blurred the ink, and I'd laugh bitterly. Even my sadness was messy. One evening, I heard him in the kitchen. I thought maybe we'd talk, maybe share dinner like before. I came out holding 2 plates of stew. "Brian, I made your favorite." He cut me off without looking up from his laptop. I already ate. "Don't make extra food, it just goes to waste." Then he walked past me, brushing my shoulder like I wasn't even there. When he was gone, I looked at the 2 plates, steam, fading gravy, thickening, and quietly scraped them into the trash. Later that night, I noticed the envelope from the bank was gone from his desk. My gut twisted. Something wasn't right. I thought about calling the bank, but the idea of checking on my son felt wrong, like betraying him. Instead, I wrote in my journal again, June 22nd. I can't tell if I'm being paranoid or protective. Maybe both. Days passed. He stopped saying good morning. He stopped saying anything. The only time he addressed me was when a bill came late, or when he needed my signature for something urgent. The house itself seemed to turn against me. The faucet dripped, the roof leaked, and the mailbox filled with letters I was too afraid to open. Still, every morning, I put on lipstick and brushed my hair before breakfast. It was silly, but it reminded me I was still someone, not just a shadow, in my own home. Then, one afternoon while cleaning, I opened the drawer in the living room where I kept old photos. I found a picture of Brian when he was 8, missing his front teeth, holding a frog, laughing so hard his eyes squinted shut. I traced his little face with my thumb and whispered, "Come back to me, baby." The phone rang, startling me. It was my old colleague from the hospital, Linda. "Eleanor, I found something interesting," she said cheerfully. "Remember that community fund we started back in 2008? The one Mr. Jensen donated to?" I hesitated. Barely. "Why?" "Well, apparently your name's still listed as a trustee, or was. My nephew at the bank said there was a change in the record last month. Strange, right?" I froze. "A change? What kind of change?" "Not sure. He just said the account's been reassigned. I thought you'd know." My heart started pounding so loud it drowned out the rest of her words. After the call ended, I sat there staring at the wall, the phone still in my hand. That night, I wrote my last journal entry for a long time, July 1st. Something's wrong. I can feel it. The money, the papers, the way Brian avoids my eyes. Tomorrow, I'll go to the bank myself. I just hope I'm wrong. I closed the notebook, slid it under my pillow, and turned off the lamp. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling through the cracks of the old windows, a sound that felt like a warning. Somewhere deep down, I already knew what I was about to find wouldn't just break my heart. It would destroy everything I thought I knew about my son. The next morning, the world felt heavy, the kind of heavy that sits on your chest before a storm. I woke up early, the sun just barely touching the curtains, and made myself coffee. It tasted bitter, even with too much sugar. My hands trembled as I opened the drawer where I kept old letters and bills. Somewhere in there was the number for the community fund Linda mentioned. I dialed it, half expecting no one to answer. A woman's polite voice came on. "Community Trust Foundation, this is Dana. How may I help you?" "Hi, dear," I said, forcing calm. "My name is Eleanor Whitmore. I used to be listed as a trustee for a patient donation fund about 15 years ago." There was a pause, the sound of typing. "Oh yes, Mrs. Whitmore, I see it here. But it seems there was a change of authorization recently. Are you calling to confirm it?" I froze. "Change? What kind of change?" "It looks like your signature was used to transfer administrative control to a secondary party, a Mr. Brian Whitmore." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "That's my son." "Ah, well, that makes sense then," she said kindly. "You must have approved it yourself. The paperwork's dated last month." My voice cracked. "Last month, I never signed anything like that." She hesitated. "Ma'am, it has your digital signature on file. Would you like me to email you a copy?" "Yes," I whispered, gripping the counter for balance. "Please send it." When the email arrived, I opened the attachment. My name was there, perfect cursive, exactly like mine. But I hadn't touched a computer in months. My blood ran cold. That night, I waited for Brian to come home. He walked in past 10, smelling faintly of whiskey and rain. "Long day?" I asked carefully. "Yeah." "Why?" he muttered, loosening his tie. I slid the printed document across the kitchen table. "You want to explain this?" He froze mid-step, his jaw tightened, eyes darting to the paper. "Where did you get that?" "From the foundation. They said you used my signature." He let out a small laugh, the kind people use when they're cornered. "Mom, relax. It's just a technical thing. The account was dormant. I figured I'd handle it for you. You forged my name." He shrugged. "You'd have done it anyway." The way he said it, so casual, so entitled, made something inside me snap. "Brian!" I said, my voice trembling. "That fund was for sick children, for families who couldn't afford treatment." He rolled his eyes. "And it's been sitting there untouched for years. I only moved it to a safer place." "Safer," I repeated. "Where Brian?" He didn't answer. I took a deep breath. "How much money did you move?" His silence was my answer. Finally, he muttered, "You wouldn't understand. It's not like you know how modern finance works." The words stung worse than the insult. It wasn't just disrespect, it was guilt, hiding behind arrogance. That night after he went to bed, I printed out every email, every document, every bank statement I could find in the shared folder he thought I didn't know about. Years of motherhood had taught me one thing: how to notice what others overlooked. The next morning, I took a bus downtown to the First National Bank of Oregon, the same one where Henry and I had opened our first joint account. The teller, a young man with kind eyes, pulled up the record for me. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said slowly, "there have been several large transfers from that charitable fund, around $120,000, all moved to an account under the same last name, Brian Whitmore." My breath caught. "Can you print that?" "I shouldn't," he said softly, glancing around. Then he lowered his voice. "But you deserve to know." He handed me a single folded sheet, his expression heavy with sympathy. I thanked him and left. My knees felt weak as I stepped into the chilly Oregon air. In my purse, the paper crinkled a quiet, damning sound. That was the moment I stopped being a mother trying to protect her son and became a woman who needed to find out who her son really was. Because if Brian could forge my name, once what else had he already done with it? I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Brian's face calm, almost arrogant, as he said, "You'd have done it anyway." By morning, something inside me had hardened. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was a woman who'd been lied to. I dressed carefully in the same navy cardigan I used to wear to the hospital and tucked the printed bank papers into my purse. If Brian thought I was too old or too weak to understand, he was about to learn how wrong he was. The First National Bank of Oregon was quiet that morning. The air smelled like coffee and printer ink. Behind the counters, people typed softly, pretending not to listen to the lives being ruined across their desks. I approached a woman with silver glasses and a name tag that read Martha. "Good morning," I said, forcing a polite smile. "I need to verify an account transfer under my name. I believe there's been a mistake." She nodded, motioning for me to sit. "Of course, Mrs. Whitmore. May I have your ID?" I handed it over, my palms sweating. She clicked through her computer, her expression slowly shifting from neutral to uneasy. She murmured. "There are indeed several large transfers. One of them was approved online from this location last month." I leaned forward. "Online? I don't even own a computer." She blinked. "That's odd. The digital signature matches your records perfectly. Someone went to great lengths to make it look legitimate." I swallowed hard. "Who authorized it?" She hesitated, lowering her voice. "It lists a secondary user, Mr. Brian Whitmore. The funds were moved to an account under his company, Whitmore Technologies, LLC. My heart sank. I knew that name. It was the side business he'd started a few years ago, supposedly developing medical software. I'd even bragged about it to my bridge group. "Mrs. Whitmore," Martha continued gently, "if you'd like, we can flag this for review, but it will trigger a formal investigation." I hesitated. Turning in my own son felt like betraying him. But hadn't he already betrayed me first? "Do it," I said quietly. "Flag it." She gave me a sympathetic look, printed out some papers, and slipped them across the counter. "I shouldn't say this," she whispered, "but I've seen this before when family gets involved. It never ends clean." Her words lingered in my mind as I stepped outside. The autumn wind whipped my hair, the sky heavy with rain. Across the street, a coffee shop window reflected my face, pale, older than I remembered. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was angry. When I got home, Brian was in the kitchen, phone pressed to his ear, pacing. "Yeah, I already moved it. Just keep quiet, okay?" She doesn't know a thing, he said, his voice low. I froze in the hallway. She doesn't know a thing. He hung up when he saw me. Oh, hey, Mom, he said quickly, forcing a smile. You were out early. I went to the bank, I said, flatly. His face went pale for half a second before he recovered. Bank. Why, I needed to check something. About that paperwork you said I signed. He shrugged, pretending nonchalance. You worry too much. Brian, I said slowly, did you use my name to move charity money into your business? The air went still. Even the refrigerator seemed to stop humming. Then he laughed short, sharp, cruel. You're unbelievable. You'd rather believe strangers than your own son. I'd rather believe the truth, I said. He took a step closer, his voice rising. You've never understood how hard I work. I'm drowning in debt because of you, your medical bills, this house. This house, I interrupted, voice shaking. Your father built this house with his hands. You were 5 when he poured the foundation. His jaw tightened. Well, maybe it's time we finally sold it. That was the moment something inside me broke, not from fear, but from clarity. I looked straight at him and said, You can lie to everyone else, Brian, but not to me. I know what you've done. He stared at me stunned for a heartbeat, then smirked. You don't know anything, Mom. But I did. And as I turned away, clutching the documents in my trembling hand, I realized I wasn't powerless anymore. He thought I was too old to fight. He was about to find out just how wrong he was. Because I wasn't just his mother anymore, I was the one person who could destroy everything he'd built on a lie. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The house was still, but I could feel tension in the walls, like the air itself knew a storm was coming. I sat at the kitchen table with my old phone scrolling through the contacts I hadn't touched in years. My thumb stopped on one name, Thomas Avery. Thomas had been Henry's closest friend, and once upon a time one of the sharpest attorneys in Eugene. He'd retired 5 years ago, but I remembered his words at Henry's funeral. If you ever need help, Eleanor, legal or otherwise, you call me. No hesitation. So I did. The line rang 3 times before a deep, sleepy voice answered. Hello, Thomas? It's Eleanor Whitmore. A pause. Then his tone shifted, awake, alert. Eleanor? Good Lord, it's been ages. What's wrong? I swallowed, trying to steady my voice. It's about Brian. I think he's done something terrible, and he used my name to do it. By the time I finished explaining, he was already in lawyer mode. Email me everything he said. The fund name transfers signatures, all of it. Don't confront him again. Not yet. But it was too late for that. After hanging up, I glanced toward Brian's office door, shut tight as always. The faint click of his keyboard echoed like dripping water. I quietly walked to my bedroom, opened the nightstand drawer, and pulled out a small black recorder, the same one I used during my hospital years, to dictate medical notes. If I couldn't make him tell the truth, I'd make sure someone else heard it. That evening, I made his favorite dinner, lasagna garlic bread, and a bottle of red wine. It was my trap, wrapped in nostalgia. When he came home, he looked suspicious. What's this? He asked, setting down his briefcase. Just dinner, I said lightly, like old times. For a while, we ate in silence. The smell of baked cheese filled the room. Then I said softly, Brian, I talked to the bank again today. He froze mid-bite. Mom, they said the funds were moved into your company account. That money was meant for sick children. He set his fork down slowly. You're overreacting. No, I said, my voice steady. You're stealing. His eyes narrowed. Watch your words. I've watched enough, Brian. You forged my name. You lied to my face. He laughed a low, ugly sound. You think I owe you the truth? You think I owe you anything? I've carried you for years. You sit here in this rotting house while I work 60 hours a week to keep us afloat. Us, I snapped. You mean you? I've seen the transfers. You didn't use that money for bills. You used it to pay off your debts, your gambling, your... He shot up from his chair. Stop, he barked. His hand slammed the table so hard the wine glass shattered. I didn't flinch. I just stared at him, the same boy I once held through thunderstorms. I may be old, I whispered, but I'm not blind, and I'm not afraid of you. He sneered. Maybe you should be. He stormed off, slamming the door to his office. Through the wall, I heard him muttering, pacing drawers, opening papers, rustling. I reached under the table and turned off the small recorder hidden beneath the tablecloth. His every word had been captured. That night, I sat in the living room listening to the recording. Each click, each insult, every word he spoke felt like proof, not just of his crime, but of the stranger he'd become. I sent the file to Thomas with a short message. I have evidence. He's losing control. Within the hour, he replied, "Good work, Eleanor. Don't confront him again. I'll contact the authorities quietly. Keep yourself safe." But as I looked toward Brian's closed door, I knew it wouldn't be that simple. He was restless, unpredictable, and I could tell he suspected something. The last sound I heard before falling asleep was his door unlocking softly in the dark, footsteps down the hall, a shadow passing my doorway. He thought I was asleep, but I saw him, and in his hand, he was holding my journal, the one that held every word, every suspicion, every note about his lies. He just found out how much I truly knew, and that meant the real war between us had just begun. I didn't move. I barely breathed. From the crack of my half-closed bedroom door, I watched Brian standing in the hallway, holding my journal. The dim light from the living room flickered across his face, pale, tense, unreadable. He flipped through the pages slowly, his eyes scanning my handwriting. Every secret, every doubt, every word I'd been too afraid to say out loud. My heart pounded so loud I thought he'd hear it. Then his voice came low, shaking with rage. "You've been writing about me, about the money." He turned toward my door. I closed my eyes, pretending to be asleep. The floor creaked under his steps until he stopped right outside my room. I could feel him standing there, breathing heavily, the journal still in his hand. Seconds stretched into minutes, then silence. The soft click of the front door. When I finally dared to look, he was gone. Morning came gray and heavy. I found the journal tossed on the kitchen table, its spine cracked, pages bent. A single line had been scribbled across one page in angry ink. "You should have trusted me." The words sent a chill through me. Around noon, Thomas called. "Eleanor, I spoke with a detective I trust," he said. "His name's Eric Malone. He'll come by this week to collect the evidence." "Don't tell Brian anything. I think he already knows," I whispered. Thomas hesitated. "Then you need to be careful. People do desperate things when they realize the truth is closing in." He was right. That evening, I noticed the framed photo of Henry missing from the mantel. A small thing, but it unnerved me. When I checked Brian's office door, it was unlocked for the first time in months. Inside the room was a mess. Stacks of papers, open envelopes, a half-finished whiskey bottle, and his laptop still glowing. On the desk sat a business card, Vanguard Investments, Private Consulting. On the back, a number written in pen, and 2 words, Final Payment. My stomach twisted. I didn't understand everything, but I knew one thing: he was planning to leave. That night, when he came home, I confronted him. He was halfway through the doorway when I said, "We need to talk." He froze, keys in hand. "Not now, Mom." "Yes, now." I walked into the living room, holding the recorder in my palm. "I've spoken to a lawyer. The police know about the transfers." His expression flickered, first confusion, then disbelief, then fury. "You went to the police. I had to. You forged my name. You stole from children, Brian." He laughed bitterly. "Stole? You think I took from them? I saved us. That money was wasted sitting there doing nothing while you sit here doing nothing." I stepped closer. "You can still fix this. Go to them, admit what you did. I'll stand by you if you do the right thing." He slammed his briefcase onto the floor. "You think you can lecture me? After all the guilt trips, all the control, I wasn't controlling you," I shouted, trembling. "I was raising you." The room exploded with years of buried anger. "I didn't ask to be raised by a martyr," he yelled. "And I didn't ask to be betrayed by my own son." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Only the clock ticked. Then his voice dropped to a whisper. "You ruined everything." He took a step forward, his face inches from mine. I could smell the whiskey on his breath. "Brian," I said softly, "please don't do this." He hesitated just long enough for me to see something flicker behind his anger, guilt, fear. Then he knocked the recorder from my hand. It hit the floor and shattered. I gasped, backing up against the table. He froze, staring at what he'd done. His chest heaved, eyes wide, as if even he couldn't believe himself. "Get out," I whispered. "Mom, get out." For the first time in years, he listened. He grabbed his coat, slammed the door, and vanished into the storm. I sank to the floor, surrounded by shards of plastic and silence. Rain hit the windows like pebbles, steady and merciless. Then in the quiet, I heard something, a faint blinking red light from the broken recorder. It was still working, still recording. And as thunder rolled outside, I looked toward the door and whispered to myself, "You can run, Brian. But this time the truth is following you." By morning, I'd make sure of it. Because the next person to knock on that door wouldn't be me begging for answers, it would be the police asking for him. I didn't sleep at all that night. Every sound made me jump, the wind against the windows, the pipes rattling in the walls, the old clock ticking too loud. I kept replaying Brian's face in my head, red with anger, his eyes wild, his breath thick with whiskey. By sunrise, my hands were still trembling. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee gone cold, staring at the broken recorder. The tiny red light had died sometime after midnight, but I'd already copied the files to my phone. His confession, the yelling, the threats, everything. Thomas called right after 7. "Eleanor, the police have what they need," he said. "Detective Malone is on his way to you this morning. Just stay calm, all right?" I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "What will happen to Brian?" There was a long pause. "That depends on him." I hung up and waited. The seconds dragged. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet, no lawnmowers, no kids biking to school. Just stillness, the kind that comes before something breaks. At 9:12 a.m., a dark sedan pulled up in front of the house. 2 officers stepped out, rain dripping off their caps. One of them, tall and composed, approached the porch. "Mrs. Whitmore." "Yes," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm Detective Malone. We have a warrant to question your son about several fraudulent transfers connected to Whitmore Technologies." I nodded. "He's not home. But he'll come back. He always does." They waited in the patrol car down the block while I sat by the window watching the driveway. My heart pounded with every passing minute. At 10:34, Brian's car turned the corner. He parked carelessly, tires screeching against the curb. From inside, I saw him glance at his phone, no doubt reading the string of missed calls I'd ignored since last night. He slammed the car door and marched toward the house, his jacket soaked, his expression unreadable. When he pushed open the front door, I was standing there, calm too. Calm. "Where are you going?" I asked quietly. He hesitated, dropping his keys onto the counter. "Out. Why, you're not going anywhere." Before he could respond, the door behind him opened again, the sound of boots on wet wood. "Brian Whitmore." Detective Malone's voice was steady, professional. "You're under arrest for fraud, forgery, and identity theft." Brian froze. "What?" His laugh was sharp, desperate. "You've got to be kidding me." "I'm afraid not, sir. We have recorded evidence and banking documents linking you directly to multiple unauthorized transfers." He turned to me, eyes wide, betrayal flashing across his face. "Mom," he said, his voice breaking, "you did this." I swallowed hard. "You did this to yourself." As the officers read him his rights, he shouted over them, "I did it for you. I was trying to fix everything you ruined. Brian, stop. You wanted this house, this life. I gave up everything for you." The officers guided his hands behind his back, the metallic click of the cuffs echoing through the living room like a gavel strike. The sound made my knees weaken. I gripped the counter to stay upright. Brian looked back at me one last time. His voice dropped, low and hoarse. "You're not my mother anymore." Then he was gone. I stood frozen by the door, watching the rain wash over the driveway. The red and blue lights flashed against the window pane, painting the walls with color like a warped reflection of Christmas lights from long ago. When the cars disappeared, silence returned. Only then did I realize my cheeks were wet, not from rain, but from tears I hadn't noticed falling. I sank into the old armchair by the fireplace, clutching Henry's mug, the same cracked one from that awful night, and whispered to the empty room I didn't want revenge. I just wanted my son back, But somewhere deep inside, beneath the grief and guilt, there was something else, a quiet, painful relief. Because for the first time in years, the truth was finally louder than his lies. I thought that would be the end of it. But as I would soon learn, it was only the beginning. The house felt like a mausoleum after Brian's arrest, too quiet, too clean, too hollow. The ticking of the old clock echoed through every room like it was counting down to something I couldn't see yet. For 2 days, I barely moved. The police had taken statements, bagged evidence, and left with polite condolences that felt more like pity. Neighbors peeked through their curtains, whispering as if tragedy was contagious. I didn't cook. I didn't sleep. I just sat by the window watching the same patch of gray Oregon sky, wondering how everything had gone so wrong, how a mother's love had turned into the very thing that destroyed her son. On the third morning, a soft knock pulled me out of my thoughts. When I opened the door, a young courier in a navy jacket stood there holding a large envelope. "Delivery for Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore," he said. I signed automatically, my hands trembling as I took it. The sender's name in the corner made my stomach twist. Avery and Green Law Offices. Thomas. I carried it to the kitchen table, sat down, and slid it open with Henry's old letter knife. Inside were 2 items, a thick folded document and a handwritten note. "Eleanor, after reviewing the situation, I uncovered something you were never told. Before Henry passed, he left an addendum to his will, one that was never filed publicly. I believe he entrusted it to me for safekeeping to be revealed only if the family loses its way. I'm sorry it has come to this, but it's time you knew what he wrote. Thomas." My fingers trembled as I unfolded the yellowing page. Henry's handwriting hit me like a wave, neat, careful, full of love. "My dearest Eleanor, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone and something between you and Brian is broken. I pray I'm wrong. I know our son. He is brilliant, but pride runs deep in him. If ever he forgets where he came from, if he ever values money more than kindness, I want everything I built to return to the one who kept our home alive. You." I felt my breath catch. My heart pounded as I read the final lines. "This house, the savings the company shares, they all belong to you, Eleanor, not him. If he ever betrays that trust, you must protect yourself. I know it will hurt, but sometimes love means letting the truth do the healing we can't." Tears spilled onto the paper before I could stop them. I pressed the pages to my chest, whispering, "Oh, Henry, you knew." For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to sob deep, ugly, cathartic sobs that seemed to come from every year I'd held everything together. When I finally looked up, the kitchen light caught the framed photo of us on the wall, Henry's arm around me, Brian in his graduation gown between us, all 3 of us smiling like the world could never break us. I stood, walked to the living room, and opened the drawer of Henry's old oak desk. Inside was a key, small brass labeled Safe Box Number 37. I hadn't opened that box since Henry's funeral. That afternoon, I took the bus downtown to the Maplewood Savings Bank, where the safe deposit boxes were kept. The same bank manager, older now balder, recognized me. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said kindly. "It's been many years." "Yes," I said softly, "it has." Inside the private room, I unlocked the small metal box. The hinges groaned like they hadn't moved in decades. Inside, wrapped in faded linen, was a stack of letters and a sealed envelope marked "For Eleanor," only if the boy forgets himself. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were property deeds, investment certificates, and a short letter written in Henry's firm, steady hand. "If Brian ever betrays you, remember this: you were never the dependent, you were the foundation. Without you, none of it would exist. Use what I've left to rebuild, not to punish. The truth will take care of itself." The words blurred as fresh tears fell. I held that letter for a long time, feeling both heavier and lighter at once. Henry's voice echoed in my head, calm, kind, certain. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky was still gray, but a thin line of light was breaking through. I didn't know it yet, but that letter would change everything. Because while the world saw me as a grieving, broken mother, Henry had quietly left me something far more powerful than revenge control. And the moment I stepped out of that bank, I knew Brian's story with the police was far from over, but mine was only just beginning. That night, I spread Henry's letters and documents across the dining table. The soft glow from the lamp made the paper look almost golden, like the past trying to warm the present. Every word Henry wrote carried the weight of love, protection, and foresight. I ran my fingers over his handwriting, hearing his voice in my head. You were never the dependent, you were the foundation. For years, I'd lived believing I needed Brian, that without him, I'd fade into the background like every other forgotten old woman. But Henry had known better. He'd seen something in me that I'd stopped seeing myself, strength. I wanted to feel proud of that, but instead I felt hollow. I walked to the fireplace, the one Henry built brick by brick. On the mantel sat a photo of Brian at 10 years old, front teeth, missing hair sticking up his arms, wrapped around my waist. We were both laughing, our eyes full of everything good in the world. I held that photo in my hand and whispered, "What happened to you, sweetheart?" The sound of rain began again outside, tapping gently against the windows. It was the same rhythm I used to hear when Brian was a boy, curled on the couch while I read to him. Back then he'd say, "Mom, promise you'll never leave me." And I'd laugh, "You'll get tired of me before I get tired of you." Now I'd give anything to go back to that moment, to the innocence before greed, before betrayal, before the sound of police handcuffs echoing through my living room. 2 days after the arrest, I received another envelope, this one stamped Lane County Detention Center. I stared at it for nearly an hour before I had the courage to open it. "Mom, I don't know why you did this to me. Maybe you think you were protecting something, or maybe you just wanted to hurt me like you say, I hurt you. But you don't know everything. I didn't act alone. There are things you don't understand about the money, the people involved, and why I had to do it. Don't trust anyone, not even the ones pretending to help you. You'll see what I mean soon. Brian." The letter fell from my hand. My first instinct was denial that he was manipulating me again, trying to twist guilt into confusion. But something in his tone felt different this time. There was fear under the anger, desperation, and one line wouldn't leave my mind. I didn't act alone. I folded the letter and tucked it into my pocket. I didn't know whether to believe him, but the thought gnawed at me like a splinter under skin. That night, I dreamed of him as a child again, sitting at the kitchen table coloring with broken crayons while I made grilled cheese. He looked up and said, "I'll make you proud one day, Mom." When I reached out to touch his hand, the drawing he was coloring turned into a bank statement. His face aged before my eyes. When I woke, I was crying. By morning, I decided to visit him. The detention center smelled like bleach and sorrow. A guard led me through the metal detectors and down a hall lined with gray doors. My reflection in the glass looked smaller than I remembered. When Brian walked in wearing that orange uniform, my breath caught. He looked thinner, his hair unkempt, eyes sunken but still sharp. He sat down across from me. The glass between us felt like a wall between 2 lifetimes. "Mom," he said quietly, "you shouldn't have come." "I had to." My voice trembled. "I read your letter." He looked down, avoiding my eyes. "Then you know it's bigger than me." "What does that mean?" I asked. He hesitated, glancing toward the guard behind him. "It means I wasn't the only one moving that money. Someone else used your name long before I did." My stomach tightened. "Who?" He looked at me finally, eyes filled with a strange mix of fear and guilt. "I can't tell you here. Just be careful who you trust, Mom. Especially your lawyer." I froze. "Thomas." But before he could answer, the guard tapped his shoulder. "Time's up." He stood, hands trembling. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered just before the door closed behind him. I sat there for a long time after he left, the hum of the fluorescent lights filling the silence. Was he lying again? Or had I been looking at the wrong villain this whole time? When I stepped outside, the rain had stopped, but the air felt heavier, darker. In my coat pocket, Henry's letter pressed against Brian's. One promised safety, the other warned danger, and for the first time, I didn't know which one to believe. For days after that visit, my mind was a storm I couldn't quiet. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Brian's voice echoing from behind that glass wall. "Be careful who you trust, Mom." I wanted to believe it was another manipulation, another desperate trick from a son cornered by his own lies. But the way he'd looked at me that day, the tremor in his voice, the fear in his eyes, it wasn't arrogance. It was warning. I told myself to let it go. The police had everything. Thomas had been my rock through it all. Still, something deep inside me, that quiet instinct every mother develops, wouldn't let the thought rest. So I did what I'd done all my life when I couldn't sleep. I made tea and started cleaning. That's when I found it. Inside the bottom drawer of Henry's old desk, beneath a stack of old insurance papers, there was a thin folder marked Avery and Green, Estate 2011. Thomas's law firm. I hadn't seen it before. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were copies of Henry's will, the same documents I'd seen years ago. Except one page had a faint watermark I didn't recognize. It read, revised December 12, 2012. The date was a year after Henry died. I blinked hard. That couldn't be right. I flipped to the signature page and my blood went cold. Henry's signature was there neat as always, but the ink looked wrong, too sharp, too uniform. Someone had forged it. I sat down, the weight of the realization crushing me. My husband's will, the same one Thomas had claimed to protect, had been altered, and the name on the revision, Thomas Avery, Executor. That night I called Detective Malone. He listened carefully as I explained everything, the folder, the date, the signature. He didn't sound surprised. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said gently, "your son's claim might not be entirely wrong. We found inconsistencies in the original fund transfers. Someone besides Brian had access to the foundation's system, someone with legal clearance." I gripped the phone tighter. "You mean, Thomas, we can't say yet, but we're looking into it. Please don't confront him directly. I promised I wouldn't, and of course I broke that promise." The next morning I called Thomas and asked him to come over. He arrived right after lunch, the same old briefcase in hand, his smile warm but practiced. "Eleanor," he said, "you look pale. You shouldn't be worrying about all this." I gestured to the table where I'd laid out the documents from the desk. I found something, I said softly. "In Henry's papers, something you never told me about." His smile faltered. "What do you mean?" I slid the forged page toward him. "This revision, dated a year after Henry's death, and your signature beneath it." He froze. Just for a second, but it was enough. When he finally spoke, his tone had changed. "Eleanor, listen to me. You don't understand how these things work." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I said. "You altered my husband's will. You took advantage of a grieving widow. And you used that same power to move the foundation. Money under my son's name, didn't you?" He sighed, closing his briefcase slowly. "You always were sharp, Eleanor. But you should have left this buried. You've made a very serious mistake." Something in his eyes made the room feel smaller. "Was Brian working for you?" I asked quietly. He smiled, cold pitying. "Brian was useful. He had access. I gave him a way to make quick money. He didn't ask too many questions, neither did you." I felt my heart hammering in my chest. "You framed him." "No," he said, standing now. "I protected him until you started digging." He stepped closer. I could smell his cologne, the same kind Henry used to wear, and suddenly it made me sick. "I'm going to the police," I said. His smirk widened. "You think they'll believe you over me?" "You're a lonely old woman, Eleanor. Your son's in jail. You've got nothing left but that big, empty house." He turned toward the door. Forget this ever happened. But what he didn't know, what no one ever seems to remember, is that I've always been one step ahead when it comes to protecting my family. Hidden beneath the stack of documents on the table was a small recording device identical to the one he'd told me to never use without legal counsel, and it had captured every word. When he left, I locked the door and sank into the armchair, my pulse pounding. Outside, the rain had stopped. The late afternoon sun filtered through the window, landing on Henry's photo, like a quiet nod from the past. I looked at the recorder, the little red light blinking. Brian had made terrible choices, unforgivable ones, but he wasn't the only guilty man. Maybe he was telling the truth, after all. That night, I made a new journal entry. My handwriting was steadier this time. October 3rd, I thought justice was about punishment, but it's really about peace. Henry was right. The truth heals in ways revenge never could. Tomorrow, I'll give the recording to the police. Whatever happens next, it's not just my story anymore, it's ours. I set the pen down, folded the page, and whispered into the stillness, "You can rest now, Henry. I'm finally ready to let go." And for the first time in years, the house didn't feel empty. It felt free. It had been a week since I turned over Thomas's recording to Detective Malone. The storm had finally passed, at least outside. Inside the house still carried a strange, echoing quiet, the kind that follows after a long cry. The police confirmed what I already knew. Thomas had forged the documents, altered Henry's will, and laundered the foundation's money through Brian's company. He was the architect. My son was only the pawn. They said justice would take time. That sounded right. Time had taken everything else already. It might as well be the one to heal me, too. But just when I thought the story was finally ending, another letter arrived. The return address stopped me Cold Lane County Detention Center. For a long while, I just stared at it, unsure if I had the strength to open it. But curiosity, or maybe hope, won out. The handwriting inside was shaky, but familiar. Mom Detective Malone came to see me yesterday. He told me about Thomas. I didn't believe him at first, but then I remembered something. A night months ago, Thomas came to the house after you'd gone to bed. He gave me an envelope and said it was a business opportunity. I thought he was helping me. I didn't know he was setting me up. I don't expect you to forgive me. I lied. I stole. I made you feel small when you were the only one who ever stood by me. But now I see how blind I was. He didn't ruin me, I let him. Because I thought pride was strength. I thought admitting I needed you made me weak. I'm sorry, Mom. I mean it this time. The letter blurred as tears welled in my eyes. There's one more thing. Thomas wasn't the only one. There's another person involved, someone who handled the accounts after him. Malone said they're still looking. If something happens, promise me you'll be careful. And Mom, if you can please don't hate me forever. Brian. I folded the paper carefully, pressing my hand against my chest as if I could stop the ache there. Outside, the sky was fading into dusk, gold melting into blue, the same colors I remembered from all those evenings when Brian was small, chasing fireflies in the yard while I called him in for dinner. That memory hurt the most because it was still beautiful. Later that night, I sat at Henry's desk again. The same desk that had once held secrets now held truth, and the burden that came with it. I took out a fresh page from my journal and began to write. October 10th. They say every mother pays twice for her mistakes once, when she makes them and again when she forgives them. I think I'm finally ready for the second part. Brian's letter didn't erase what he did, but for the first time I saw my boy again, not the man who betrayed me, but the child who used to fall asleep with his head on my lap. I'll visit him again. Not to reopen old wounds, but to close them properly this time. I set the pen down and looked out the window. The night was calm, too calm. That's when I noticed something unusual. A black car parked across the street. Engine off. No lights. Just sitting there. At first, I thought it was a neighbor, but as minutes passed, the car didn't move. And then a phone in the living room buzzed. Not mine. I followed the sound to the couch cushion and found a phone I didn't recognize, an old flip phone, half dead, vibrating weakly. There was one unread message on the screen, unknown number. He wasn't lying. You're next. I dropped the phone, my heart hammering. Outside the car, headlights flashed, once, then went dark again. I backed away from the window, whispering into the empty house. Henry, what have we stumbled into? The clock on the wall ticked louder, slower, heavier, as if counting down to something waiting just beyond the silence. And for the first time since all this began, I wasn't sure the danger had ever really ended. The next few minutes felt like a dream I couldn't wake from. I stood frozen by the window, staring at the black car parked across the street. No movement, no sound. Just that eerie sense of being watched, the kind that makes your skin tighten, even in a warm room. The message on the burner phone kept glowing in my hand. He wasn't lying. You're next. My first thought was that it had to be some mistake, a sick prank maybe, but deep down I knew better. Someone out there didn't want this story to end. I turned off every light in the house and sat on the floor near the couch, my heart pounding in my chest. The neighborhood was quiet. Even the rain had stopped. The only sound was the faint buzz of the refrigerator and the echo of my own breathing. Then a second text appeared. Unknown, check your porch. My blood turned to ice. Slowly, I crawled toward the front window. Through the curtains, I saw a small white envelope sitting on the welcome mat. No headlights now. The car was gone. It took me 10 full minutes to gather the courage to open the door. The night air was sharp and cold. I bent down, picked up the envelope, and locked the door behind me. Inside was a single photograph, grainy, printed on cheap paper. It showed me standing at the bank a week earlier talking to the clerk. In the corner of the photo, someone had scrawled 3 words in red marker, "Stop digging, Eleanor." By morning, I had called Detective Malone. He arrived within the hour, his expression grim. "Who else knows about this?" he asked, scanning the photo. "Just you," I said. "And now whoever took it." He nodded slowly. "You did the right thing calling me. We're looking into Thomas's partners, people he might have worked with. If this is who I think it is, they're nervous. About what I asked. About losing everything they built on your husband's foundation." He bagged the photo and the phone as evidence. Before he left, he looked at me with genuine concern. "Keep your doors locked, Mrs. Whitmore. And if anyone contacts you again, call me first, not them. I promised I would. But promises don't stop nightmares. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the floorboards made me sit upright. Every passing car felt like a threat. I kept the light on Henry's old pistol, the one he used for target practice, resting on the nightstand. Around 2 a.m., I heard a soft rustle outside the window. I held my breath, hand tight on the gun. But when I pulled back the curtain, there was nothing, just rain starting to fall again. The fear was suffocating, but beneath it, something else began to stir anger. All my life I'd been taught that good women stayed quiet, endured, forgave. But quiet women get forgotten. Quiet women get erased from their own stories. Not this time. The next morning, I went to the police station. I handed Malone the last of Henry's documents and told him everything I'd found, every hidden folder, every transaction, every name Thomas had ever mentioned. When I finished, he looked at me the way people look at someone stronger than they expected. "You just gave us the missing piece," he said. "We'll take it from here." But as I left the station, a strange calm came over me. Not peace exactly, but purpose. When I got home, I made tea and sat by the window. The sky outside was clearing. Across the street where the black car had been a single police cruiser now stood guard. The fear that had gripped me for weeks slowly began to ease. I opened my journal one last time, October 17th. I used to think survival meant keeping quiet, but now I know it means speaking when it's hardest. Maybe justice isn't something you wait for. Maybe it's something you build piece by piece, no matter how late in life. Henry, you were right. The truth healed us, not all at once, but enough to begin again. As for Brian, I'll visit him next week. Not to relive what we lost, but to tell him I finally forgive him. I set down my pen, looked out the window, and for the first time in months, I smiled. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain and pine. The world felt new, fragile, but alive. Then the phone rang. The same old flip phone. The one Detective Malone had taken as evidence. Its screen lit up with a new message. "Unknown, you think it's over, Eleanor. It's not." The message vanished before I could read it again. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, and I realized the storm wasn't gone. It was only circling back. What would you have done in my place? Would you have stopped when the truth cost your family, or kept digging until you unearthed everything? Tell me in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Because this story, my story, isn't finished yet.